everyone, welcome, and thank you for coming back to Listening In, the National Counselling and Psychotherapy Society podcast. In this series, we want to provide the opportunity for you to listen in to some of the conversations that I'm lucky enough to have every day. That is, with a variety of wonderful people and organisations all working in the field of mental health and well-being. Please be aware the topic of suicide is the focus of this episode. Today, I'm talking to Charlotte Edwards, Service Manager at HOPELINE247, the helpline for the charity Papyrus, Prevention of Young Suicide. Recorded towards the end of October 2024, Charlotte and I sat down to chat about the work of Hopeline advisors and the unique ongoing service they offer to young people who find themselves in crisis. Having always worked in the charity sector, Charlotte believes in advocating for the important and often forgotten role helplines have to play in mental health support. And in the case of Hopeline 247, she wanted to be clear that the work she and her colleagues do isn't about saving lives, it's about helping young people save their own lives. Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time today. And do you know what? I was just thinking, it feels really nice because you and I are used to, sort of for the most part, cramming everything into half an hour, and that's literally just sort of catching up on what you've been doing and sort of, you know, sharing anything we need to share with each other. So to sort of like have a whole hour with you and just sort of, I suppose, get to know you and the work that bit better than just on that as and when sort of catch-up basis just feels like a real privilege.
Oh, I feel the same as well. And like we said, we can talk for England anyway, the pair of us. We don't stop doing. That's why it is cramming everything into that half an hour. So it's nice to be able to come to something like this and not have like those nerves that you might get if you don't really know know the person that you're meeting. So that's a nice feeling today.
Absolutely, and hopefully that enjoyment will come through and, you know, help other people enjoy it too, because of course it's sort of difficult things that our work deals with, isn't it, you know? And it's not the sort of conversation you would say we can enjoy and have fun around, but of course that is a really important aspect to it, I think, especially when it's our work. So much of the time you've got to be able to just step into that other mindset, haven't you? Just to be able to sort of cope with it all sometimes.
Absolutely. But hopefully what we get across is that the conversation isn't that scary.
Yeah.
And yeah, hopefully we can get that point across here that we do have to talk about suicide. It is scary at times, but it's really important. And actually, once you've got that information, you've got an answer to a question of if someone's experiencing thoughts of suicide, some of that fear might be taken away a little bit because you know what you're dealing with and you can make a bit of an action plan, or you'll know what kind of support you might need to kind of look for. So hopefully that comes across as well as we carry on talking.
Oh, for sure. It's a really important point, and absolutely we'll come back to it, because I think there are still many people who think talking about it is tempting fate, talking about it is dangerous, it's risky, and yet we know the evidence suggests, you know, the absolute opposite, and how important it is to have those conversations and to name what's going on. But absolutely, let's come on to that in a bit, and you can share, you know, the experiences that you have with Hopeline and obviously Papyrus more generally. But I suppose first, so you're service manager, am I right?
I am, yes, at the moment, service manager.
Okay, and that's at Hopeline?
Yeah, it is. So Hopeline being the 24-hour helpline that operates through Papyrus, Prevention of Young Suicide.
Yeah, and that's really important to say as well, actually, because I think it went 24/7 since I've known you, hasn't it? It's sort of been, what, the last 18 months, couple of years, or
It has, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we're coming up to about 2 years now. So it was always a goal for us to go 24/7. We know that suicide doesn't stop when we want to stop work. So we knew there needed to be more support. Shuts at 5 o'clock, all the statutory types of support. And we wanted to make sure that we were here in young people's darkest hours, when they finish work, when they finished education, when they're feeling lonely, and accessible on different channels as well, because it's not always practical to make a call and talk about something really personal and sensitive when you're living in a house with other people, regardless of who that is, family, friends, partners, kids, things like that. So we wanted to make sure that we were here for those people when they need us the most.
That's such a good point. And I know something, again, we'll probably come on to in more detail in a bit, just about, and I think maybe I'm wrong saying this, I don't know, but for young people in particular, perhaps those different avenues, different ways of accessing that help, other than having to actually speak on the phone, could be so important and advantageous for them. But just, if you don't mind, is it okay to ask a little bit just about your background and how you ended up doing this type of work, Charlotte?
Yeah, of course. So I think most people are touched by suicide in some way, from all walks of life. It doesn't matter what profession you're in. It might be personally, it might be professionally. So in my personal life, I have been bereaved by suicide from a family member, and I've also supported a lot of friends and family that have experiencing thoughts of suicide and worked with them to keep safe. So that's my kind of personal connection to doing the work that we do, and doing something proactive to help them keep safe. And that's what HOPELINE does. We work on keeping people safe in the moment. So there's that connection, and that's a lot of the reason why the staff that work at Papyrus do work here, is because we've all got that connection in some way, and we're drawn to this work for some reason. And I think in any types of roles like this, you're naturally an empath, and you want to help, and you want to hear what's going on for people, and be there for someone when they need you the most. But equally, in terms of helpline work, because that's what we are on HOPELINE247, I think the work that helplines do is magic. I think that they're an underdog in some ways, not recognised as statutory support or a key person in a young person's life, but actually we're there picking up the phone. You don't have to make an appointment. You don't necessarily have to wait for us to answer. We're here. You can dial when you need. You can text us when you need, web chat, email, and it's in the moment when that person needs it the most, and allows them to be in control of their situation. And they might never have been in control. Some of them are children, and we're asking them, what do you need? What do you want? So I do think that helplines are massive and a little bit underrepresented at sometimes. So it's nice to be able to give a service a voice, to say, look at how spectacular we are and the work that we do. And then the work that Papyrus does in general, the campaigning and training and banging on the doors of governance and things like that, that just enhances the work that the helpline does even more. And it really does all go hand in hand. We couldn't do it without one another, each team here.
Yeah, that's really important. And I think it's almost like helplines, like obviously the one that you run, it's almost like it's sort of taken for granted, isn't it? You see those links, or you see those, the details on the bottom of different websites, or on the back of a toilet door, or, wherever you might be. And it's almost so much in our consciousness, actually, I think, which obviously is a brilliant and a good thing. But I think, like you say, we sort of forget about what's behind that. We forget about what that's actually doing. And it's when, I suppose, people really are in that absolute time of need. And as you've already alluded to, often in the dark hours, the early hours of the morning, that those numbers all of a sudden become so significant and so important. But yeah, underrepresented, but taken for granted, I think, too. And another reason why it's so lovely to have this conversation with you, as a voice behind that work and representing that work and saying, look, this is what we do and this is how important it is joy to give you that space today to do that. So do you mind me asking, what did you do before you did this? Did you do something completely different, or have you always done this, Charlotte?
So I think, like I said, when you're in this kind of work in whatever capacity, you're naturally a bit of an empath. You care about people, you want to support people. So I have got a bit of a background in helpline. I've worked in the world of helpline for around 8-9 years now. But before that, I did do a little bit of community support with it was some local veterans in my local area, in my little town where I'm from, and that was for everything: welfare, helping transition back into civilian lifestyle, housing, family support, bereavement, mental health, physical health, absolutely everything. It was like a one-stop shop.
I see.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. So you've always really been drawn to that type of work that's about support, that's about assisting other people. And yeah, it's funny, isn't it, how you just get drawn to these things. And so those transitions have been made from the work you did with veterans straight into HOPELINE itself.
So I used to work originally for a national eating disorder charity called Beat, and they also operate helpline and do some fantastic work. They've got a whole range of different ways of getting in touch with them. They're brilliant. So I worked there first for a good few years, and then moved into HOPELINE. And I think Papyrus, because of my personal experiences, it kind of shouted out a little bit to me. And I think when you really connect with an organisation's values and what they stand for, what the mission is and what that strategy is, when you really connect with that, you feel like you've found your place. And I think if that ever changes, it's time to rethink where you're at and what you want to do. So I'm quite lucky, really, that I've been in that place for such a long time where I do align with the values and really want to be part of that mission and that strategy to prevent more suicides.
And do you know what, Charlotte? I have to say, ever since I've known you, that really comes through. I know, like we said a moment ago, we only tend to sort of, have those half-hour meetings. What's going on? Do you need us to sort of share anything about the work you're doing? And yet there's something about you when we have those conversations, you really embody that work. I don't know if this sounds a little bit sort of far-fetched or a bit over the top, but I really genuinely mean it. You don't sound like somebody that's just, saying stuff verbatim, that you've been told to say or something. You always come across as somebody that really believes in it, and really wants to do your best to get those messages out there so that ultimately you are keeping people safe and saving lives. Let's face it, let's not hold back from, the main aspect of the work you and all of your colleagues are doing. But yeah, you really do embody that, I have to say.
Oh, thank you. That's so lovely to hear. And I think we want to do that here. We just want to make a difference. And really what we're doing is helping young people save their own lives. And they do that time and time again by coming up with the safety plans, and it's empowering them to do that for themselves, which is massive, for children and young people.
That's such an important point, that actually it's them ultimately that's doing it, isn't it? Of course. They're
in control in that situation, aren't they? They're in control of their own lives and what they do next. We just put some tools in their toolbox to help them out along the way.
Yeah, for sure. And were you on the phone lines to start with before you moved into the service manager role?
Yeah, so I've worked as an advisor, and I've worked in the HOPELINE manager role as well, who manages the team of advisors. So we've got a couple of different teams. So I've done those roles before stepping into this role, but still now we do kind of dip in and out of the helpline role in itself. We like to keep it fresh and keep our toes dipped in, and it's really good to know what's happening on the calls. We've got a front row seat to what's happening in young people's lives, so it would be a shame to not experience that and not be part of that work that's being done. And it's so special when you hear from those people.
And so we've mentioned a few times young people today. What age range are we talking about? What age range does Hopeline work with?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think when you say young people, you instantly think under 18s or under 25, but we're 35 and under.
Okay.
Across the UK. And the reason for that is when we were founded, it was by a group of bereaved parents who wanted support for each other. They wanted to make a difference, and they didn't want anyone else to feel the pain that they were feeling as bereaved parents losing their children. And their children were age ranged between the age of 8 and 35. So that's why we exist to be 35 and under.
Oh, I didn't know that. So it really traces its roots back to something so very personal. And that's the reason those age ranges exist.
Absolutely.
Well, I never. Okay. And how long ago was that? Do you know, Charlotte?
So we were founded on the spot.
Sorry.
In the 70s, I think it was. It was quite a while ago. We've not long celebrated some big birthdays. Actually, no, I think it was 1997, I think. So we would have celebrated our 25th birthday recently, a couple of years back, where we really celebrated being around for so long, but also how far we've come in that time, because we started as a small charity, like most charities do. You know, you start off small, don't you? And the helpline part of Papyrus was predominantly there for parents and carers to give them a space, because there was nothing. There's nothing. You know, there wasn't much bereavement support or anything like that. But also parents that wanted to know what to do if their child was experiencing thoughts of suicide. And then over time, we've boomed into being HOPELINE247. That's now for anyone under the age of 35, anyone supporting someone experiencing thoughts of suicide, but then also offering a debrief service to anyone that might need it, whether that's professionals having difficult conversations about suicide, or parents, friends, anyone who's having those chats and needs a safe space to be able to say, I don't know if I've done a good job. And needing to be able to recognise for themselves that they've done a good job, because that's, I think, when you truly believe I've made a bit of an impact.
Yeah, that fear, I think, and that anxiety around, you know, you've had the conversation, which is to take something in itself, but then to come out of that space and to reflect and to think, should I, did I, could I have, oh no, need I have, you know, all of those what ifs, I think, that come in so many areas in our life. But I think particularly when you've had that type of conversation, it doesn't matter if you're just a friend, a family member, or, like you say, a professional too. We're all human beings. And yeah, the fear or that sense of, I think, responsibility that people feel in that can be so great. And I think that debrief service that you offer, and I know we've shared that a lot across our networks for you, because it really is unique and really so very special and important for people to know that that's there, and to be able to have those conversations with somebody that can just sit and listen and reassure, you know, or explore other things that perhaps they could say another time if that conversation was ever needed again. So that's that really is, I think, a really important service that you guys offer.
It absolutely is. And it's like you said, it is quite special. It is unique, and it gives people something to, you know, if they are needing that space. It can be anxiety inducing, like you said, and scary. And I think we always will go, oh, I should have said this instead. But hindsight is a great thing, and we like to just remind people that it's just, you know, you've had one conversation. That doesn't need to be the end. You can try, you know, you can have another conversation. You can go back to it and say, the other day when we were talking about this, can we talk about it again? Can I ask, you know, a little bit more about that, and check in with how they're feeling now? But it's like you said, that reassurance, and we can try and offer that as much as possible in sharing that people are working so hard to support those around them, but they need to get some of that reassurance from themselves to say, actually, in the moment, what happened was what I could do in that moment. That was what I could give at that time. And ultimately, it's recognising someone was struggling, and that's better than nothing. It's doing something still. And that's a bigger impact than I think people will understand in the moment, because they want to fix it, don't they? Take it away, fix it and give it back. And we can't do that.
Oh, you're so right, Charlotte, honestly. And so many times, you'll hear somebody say, oh, I don't know what to do, or I don't know if I said the right thing. And it's about just saying, but you were there, you listened, you sat alongside them, and that's often enough, isn't it? It really is. Yeah, and I think as well, in terms of that debrief, just for somebody to sort of say, and are you okay? How are you? Never mind what did you say or what did you do, or them offering that information, but just to sort of check in on them. Of course, I'm sure you'll be aware that many of the people listening to this will be professionals. They will be counsellors and psychotherapists and people working within the mental health field more generally. And many of those, particularly the practitioners, they have supervisors that they can contact and speak to. They have us, they have their professional bodies that they can get in touch with. But we're not there 24/7. Supervisors go on holiday, they have their breaks, they have their hours of working. Professional bodies work to office hours and, have an influx of queries and questions coming in that get dealt with, on a case-by-case basis. So to have, again, the option and the opportunity of calling a service like you offer, there and then in the moment is just extraordinary. It's and I suppose again, without sounding too grand, want to thank you, for providing that service, and all of your team that are on the other end of the phone at that point. Thank you for all you do, whether that's for, colleagues of mine, or whether that's just, friends, family members of people that are in crisis at that point, or they're concerned about. Thank you for all that work that you do in that.
Oh, thank you. And I think it is so important for professionals to know that as well, because like you said, services do close, there are office hours, there are holidays, there are appointments that you need to book for some things, and it's okay to reach out to us. And we would always say, what other support do you have around you? And people will say, I'll get clinical supervision, I've got a supervisor, I've got this, I've got a good line manager, and we'll say, take it to them as well. Mm-hmm. You build up that network for yourself as well as you're wanting to do for that person struggling. And then it is a heavy press on self-care. And I know everyone talks about self-care, and I think, there's a list of have a bath and meditate, and sometimes it doesn't fit for people. Sometimes it doesn't fit for our personalities and what our needs are. Sometimes the worst thing we could do is have a bath or try and shut off to meditate. So it's doing what you want to do, whatever that is, whether it's watching something on TV, having a cup of tea, ringing a friend, booking something to look forward to, whatever it is that you need to do that's yours and for you, then that's self-care, not a list that we feel like we have to follow. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be as intense as going, right, I'm going to do self-care time now. You can just think to yourself, I'm going to go and get some fresh air, and that's enough. Just breathe in the air, get a brew, whatever it is that you need. And I think that's important. So when we talk about self-care, it is an intense, big scheduled amount of time, and it has to be from a fancy list of self-care tasks. It can just be what makes you feel more connected and grounded, but what you enjoy as well.
Absolutely. So back to HOPELINE, you've obviously helped us understand that this is a 24/7 service. You have told us about the people that call in terms of that age range, 8 to 35. And I know even just saying 8 will sound really shocking to some people, that there are 8-year-olds out there that are accessing services like that. But again, we need to, look at it squarely on and understand the reality of what's going on in that sense. What happens when somebody calls, if that's not, number one, a stupid question or actually too big a question? But can you give any sense? I know, of course, that's unique to everybody, but what might that be like for somebody, for those of us that aren't sat on a helpline, understanding quite how it all unfolds the moment you pick up that call to somebody?
Absolutely. I think it's a good question because young people are scared to pick up the phone. Even adults are scared to pick up the phone. It isn't our norm anymore, is it? Everything's online, digital, and we kind of hide behind that, and it stops us from having conversations in the moment. We always think that any young person ringing us is so brave for just being able to dial that number. We have had children younger than 8 contact the helpline. We've had kids as young as 7 reaching out for support, which is huge and so brave. A lot of the time they are with an adult who can support them with that call. But, you know, single-handedly, they're incredible. You know, anyone ringing us is incredible working with us. So they'll ring through and they'll get through to an advisor. And the advisor will share some information about the helpline. So that's our remit of service. What we're here to do is talking about suicide, share the age that we're here for 35 and under across the UK. We also share that we've got an intervention policy as well, and it just means we've got that transparency out there as soon as we're picking up that phone with that person to say, you know, if you're in immediate danger or you tell us that someone else is in immediate danger, we might have to pass any details that we might have about you onto the emergency services, and that just makes it clear. And we'll remind people about that, even if it's the second, third, fourth time calling us. It's important that they remember that exists, because if we have to come back to it, we don't want to surprise anyone. Being transparent is really important. So then we'll make sure that that person fully understands what it is that we've said. We need to make sure our language is right for that person. So we make sure that they understand what we mean. And then we ask directly, are you calling us today because you're having thoughts of suicide? Because we want to get that out in the open as well. It's so important to ask that question clearly and directly to know what it is that's going on for that person. We call it an invitation sometimes when you might notice signs that someone's thinking about suicide. And I think for us, the biggest invitation is that person's called. So we know that there's something going on for this person that would lead them to contacting us. And then once they do that, we'll ask them a bit about what's been going on for them, if they can tell us what's happened to make them feel like suicide's becoming an option for them, and really unpick it with them and give them that space. And we'll hear, we call it their story. We'll hear their story in the moment, and let them talk us through it, kind of using like coaching techniques to get that information and hear what it is that's going on for them, what that impact's like, what support they might have, what they're looking for, essentially. But we also look for anything that we would call a connection to life. So what's keeping them here, what's going on for them. And we're hearing a lot things like feeling uncertain about suicide. So they know that it's an option, but actually they know that they've also got other options, such as keeping safe. We also hear things around how it's family that keep them alive. It might be that they have a little bit of hope that things might change for them. Pets is a huge one for young people. And I think a lot of us can relate to that. Animals are a huge comfort, and people really do love their animals, don't they? Sometimes a little bit more than they love humans, but you know, we'll take anything that's keeping them alive. Once we've got that, we try and strengthen that, because if there's just 1% of them that wants to stay alive, there's something to work with, and we can build on that, and we can fight against those thoughts. And that's when we start looking at safety planning. We'll introduce that to the young person and explain to them what that means. And for us, when we safety plan, it's very collaborative and young person led. So we might ask some questions, but we're not filling their safety plan with anything that they aren't agreeing to. We're not saying, right, well, just, you know, if you just do this, then that should work. We're asking them to tell us. So that's when it comes into things like the self-care stuff. What is it that you enjoy? What do you like to do? Is there anything that you've previously liked to do, but you might have fell out of love with it for a little bit, or you've just not got round to doing it for a while? And try and get as many suggestions as possible. If someone's struggling, we do give some suggestions, but if they were said, no, that's not for me, it wouldn't go in the plan because it has to be about them. And we also look at things like what strengths they've got as a person, and a lot of the time the stuff that comes through is how much young people care, whether that's about their pets or family and friends or the world, or a hobby that they've got. People care so much, and we have to tell them that they need to then give themselves a little bit of that care. Why are you giving it to everyone else and everything else? Hold a little bit back for yourself and look after you. Otherwise you can't look after everyone else, and you can't care about everyone else and do good things in the world. So we do that, and we do a lot of signposting and things like that. But the way that we do our safety plans is it's a digital platform that we have. It's called HOPELINE. So it's through our website, the Papyrus website. There's a button at the top that the young people click. It says HOPELINE. And once we've filled in their HOPELINE, they get 2 random words generated, and that acts as a password. They pop that password in and their safety plan will come up. It can include pictures. We can change the colour of the text. So it's anything that's going to make it more accessible, but also more connecting to that young person.
Yeah, really personalised.
Yeah, absolutely. So if they say to us, I love my dog so much, we'd be asking, what dog have you got? And we'd be trying to find that breed of dog in our bank of images to put that in, to remind them that that dog's, there for you, and you're there for the dog, and that sort of stuff. But then they can access that digital platform wherever they are on whatever device. All they need to do is go on the Papyrus website and pop those 2 words in, their plan will come up. And then if they want to edit that for themselves, if they want to edit it, they'd have to ring us back and we'd edit it for them, just to keep it as safe as possible and make sure they've got a safe space to check in with. And after a certain amount of time of logging in to that plan, a message will pop up to say as well, it's been a while, do you need to ring? Just as a little prompt to say it's okay if you do need to do that. But the stats that we've had from that shows that young people really are going back onto their safety plans multiple times.
I was going to ask you that, actually, whether you're able to track that and what that looks like. So they really do repeatedly visit that. Okay.
They do. Yeah, so we can track it. And it's for a helpline, and I'm sure if anyone else is working on the likes of a helpline where you might have a one-off interaction with someone, you'll know that the end result or any kind of impact is really hard to measure. You don't know what's happening after that call. You don't find out unless you have those rare moments of someone giving you an update, which is very precious and lovely, but we don't get it very often at all because it's not an expectation, and we want people to go and live their lives and thrive, essentially. We don't want to keep them stuck with us, and in the nicest way possible, we always say we don't want you to call us back because we want you to have the right support around you. We're here if you need us, but ideally you'd be in a place where you don't need us. But this allows us to see impact because we're seeing that people will keep going on. Sometimes we've had records of it being per one safety plan around 5 visits in 1 month and things like that. So it's quite big, and that's what I was saying before about young people are saving their own lives all of the time. We're here, Papyrus is here, but young people are saving their own lives once they've had that interaction with us on our helpline.
So they're learning good choices to make, better choices to make that will keep them safe, that will keep them alive.
And it's their choices because it's their words. They've worked on that. So that's so special as well, because it isn't just us being the professional saying we know best, do this. It's saying you know best about, you're the expert of you. We can guide you through some things and help you get some tools and some signposting and be equipped to have that conversation. But you're going to save your life by doing this because you're the one taking those steps towards safety.
It sounds like there's an aspect to what you do that's sort of like plugging young people back into themselves, rediscovering who they are, whether that is their skills, their qualities, the things they care about, the things they love, the good things about their life, and almost helping them remember who they really are, aside from those suicidal thoughts, or aside and apart from those difficult aspects of their life that have brought them to contacting you in the first place, if that makes sense. It's almost like, please tell me if I'm wrong, won't you? But, let's just pop that to one side, and let's just look at you as a human being and who you are and why you deserve and need to live.
That's absolutely right, and that's the conversation that we're also having with anyone that's concerned about someone. So if we get a parent or a partner or something like that calling through saying, I'm worried about this person, obviously the conversation's very suicide heavy. That's what we're here for. But we like to remind them as well that you don't have to make this the centre of everyone's universe, because that person's still, your child, that they've always been with the same personality that they've always had, and they might still enjoy the things, and that relationship you've still got shouldn't change. Yes, you're dealing with something really difficult and dark right now, but that doesn't mean that you can't still say, right, well, we like going to the cinema together, let's go, and doing those things, and that will reconnect them as well. And it will allow them to know that having thoughts of suicide isn't just their personality. It's not just who they are. They are still that person that they've always been.
Absolutely that. I think that's absolutely vital, isn't it, in this work that you do. And you mentioned there, of course, those conversations are still suicide heavy because of that's what the reality is in their lives at that time. So what are you hearing from young people, Charlotte? And do you feel that's changed over time? So what I suppose I'm asking is about those contributory factors, those things that are really concerning young people at the moment.
Absolutely. I think it changes from season to season, month to month, whatever's going on in the world. We do consistently hear a lot about, struggles with mental health, which is obviously huge, and it's a massive impact for young people. And that's a really common theme that we hear. We hear a lot from young people that talk about the feeling of isolation and loneliness. And I guess when you're struggling with a couple of different things like mental health, and you are in that place, isolation will become part and parcel, and it's really hard. People feel so disconnected from the world that they've got no one, and this is why suicide's becoming an option for them. Equally, we hear a lot about relationships and struggles with relationships. So that might be family relationships, it could be the breakdown of a romantic relationship, or it could be friendships breaking up as well. And the impact that has on people, no matter how old you are, is huge. It can feel like the end of the world when you fall out with someone. It is like a loss. You grieve that person. And in the initial stages of that happening, that feeling so intense and hard to deal with and process, that suicide does become an option for people. And just on that theme of grief as well, we hear a lot about bereavement. We hear from people that are bereaved by suicide, people that have lost loved ones. Pets is a big one, and it's a huge theme that comes through to us.
It's funny you keep mentioning pets. That clearly must be such a common theme, and it's something I'd never really thought about before. But of course, for younger people, they're sort of in many ways one of their primary relationships, aren't they? And actually, in my own work as a practitioner, if grief is an element, or loss more generally is an element, perhaps, of what I feel is part of somebody's story, although they may not have named it necessarily, sometimes I will ask them about that. And sometimes the loss of a pet is their first ever experience of grief, isn't it? And it never ceases to amaze me how raw that can still be for some people. Regardless of the circumstance, sometimes it could be the pet's being given away, sometimes it's obviously that the pet has died. So it's really interesting to hear you mentioning that such a lot as coming into the work, whether that's on a protective side, that you were talking about earlier, caring for their pet so much it's worth staying alive for. But equally, perhaps losing a pet or concerns about a pet being a reason why somebody might be struggling. Again, sort of something I suppose we take for granted a little bit is the animals in our lives and our relationships with them. So, yeah, that's really interesting. And what about, so you've talked about this very broad age range, 8 to 35. Does there tend to be a particular age group that you will find contacts you more often? Or is it really across the board?
We do hear from people of all age groups, and we do hear from people that are outside of that age remit as well. And we do still support people. We wouldn't say we're not going to support you. People are experiencing thoughts of suicide. If we can keep someone safe and help them to keep safe, then we're going to do it. But them teenage years, anything from kind of 13, 14 up to late teens, 20s seems to be the highest that we hear, but we do hear from all age ranges, and we'd always just encourage anyone that's needing that support to reach out to us.
Yeah, of course. But what you're saying is it's those that what we know, what can often be those very turbulent sort of teenage, adolescent, young adult years that seems to be prevalent in the work that you do. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, and we know that suicide is the biggest killer in under 35s in the UK, and I think anytime people hear that, it sounds shocking, and it is shocking. The reason that we name that is because it is shocking, and we want people to understand the prevalence and how important it is for us to build suicide safer communities, and we can all be a part of that in some way. You don't have to work at Papyrus to be part of that. We can all be having open conversations and learning more and noticing when someone might not be their normal self potentially. If you notice a change in someone, being able to have direct conversations to find out what's going on for them is going to be key.
I've got a bit of a thing about that wider conversation, and of course I would hope, and I wonder, whether this is your experience too, that it is talked about perhaps more. It is talked about perhaps more openly. But I feel sometimes there's still such a long way to go. There's still so much fear around the whole topic. And I don't just mean what we were talking about earlier about the fear of having a conversation with an individual, but I just mean that discourse around it, societal, cultural discourse. And, we talk about health and safety, and there's been, huge improvements in terms of health and safety, in the workplace or whatever that might be, fire safety. We've all got things in our homes or an awareness that we're taught when we're younger around these things, all about keeping physically safe. And I do often think if only that conversation about suicide could be embedded so that it was such a normal part of our lives and our conversations, that perhaps those statistics would improve, perhaps those numbers would go down, just as they have for, accidents in the workplace or, home fires or whatever that might be. Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does make sense. And I think part of the work that Papyrus does is trying to work towards that. But there is that fear and there is that anxiety. And I think that comes with being the humans that we are. We do have anxiety around certain conversations. We don't want to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, or we don't want to overstep a little bit maybe. We don't know whether we're the right person, but actually you just need to be a person noticing something and caring enough to ask. And there is that fear around, if I talk about suicide and we're going to put the idea in someone's head, there's evidence that suggests that doesn't happen. We do have to be more careful when we talk about methods of suicide, for example, because if someone is experiencing thoughts of suicide, we wouldn't want to share some ideas on how they might go about ending their own lives. But you can't put the idea in someone's head by asking if they're experiencing thoughts of suicide. You're just opening a conversation and saying, I'm a safe person to talk to. But then once you've asked that question, people then say, but what then? What if they say yes? You know, what do I do then? And we have to kind of have that conversation then to say, ask them to tell you more. Or, you know, just say, okay, you know, thanks for sharing that with me. That's quite big. Do you want to talk more about it and see what happens? But it does fill people with fear and dread and anxiety of knowing, what do I say now in this conversation? What would I say next? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I do the wrong thing?
Yeah.
What if I'm not the right person?
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like from the work you do, it's as much about, as you described earlier, supporting friends, family in helping them have that conversation as much as it is speaking to people directly that are having those thoughts at that time. So that's a really important aspect to that work. And it's something I just wanted to ask a bit more about as well, because we talked earlier and you alluded to earlier about how people can have that conversation with HOPELINE. And we said about how it's not always easy, and perhaps, again, particularly for young people, to have it as a conversation over the phone. So could you just explain and tell us a little bit more about what other platforms or areas, I don't know what word to use, what other opportunities people have in ways to access and have that conversation and support that isn't having to speak in that traditional sense?
Absolutely. And I can talk about this from a couple of different angles as well, because not only is it about the channel that people are contacting, but also about people that might not be able to have that conversation with us over the phone as well. So we've got 4 different ways of getting in touch with us at the moment on HOPELINE247, and that's making that phone call. But we also have a text number. It's now a short code number, so it's easy to remember. It's just 88247. It isn't an immediate response. You'll get a response within 24 hours. It's usually a lot less than that. But you get an auto message that'll let you know that that's what will happen. You know, it could be up to 24 hours, and that's where they can just text with us. And it's kind of like just texting with a friend. We'll try and mirror a young person's language and communicate how they're communicating with us. So sometimes people might send bigger messages because they want to explain more, or some people might send shorter, snappier messages, and we will kind of mirror that to make sure we're connecting. So we have that platform. We also have an email platform as well, to reach out to us. That works a little bit similar to text, where it might be up to 24 hours for a response. It never usually is, but we just let people know it isn't an immediate response. So if you're able to wait for a response, that's a good platform to use, and you can just put everything down that is in your mind, whatever it is that you want to say, and send it off. And sometimes that's helpful for people to just get it out, type it out. It's out of the head and it's going somewhere else. And kind of plan what they want to say a little bit as well, which on the phone, you're having an immediate conversation. It might feel a little bit harder to do that, or you might forget elements of what it is that you want to say. And we also have web chat. So web chat is an immediate response because it's a live chat with an advisor, and that's through the Papyrus website. When that chat is live and there's an advisor available, the button will appear at the bottom of the screen. It'll just say HOPELINE247 chat. Click that and you'll get connected with an advisor. And that's where you can have a bit of a back and forth there with an advisor and talk through what's going on for you. But equally, for people that might struggle and potentially have some accessibility issues, we would, if say they were non-verbal and things like that, we'd always say get in contact with us on our digital platforms. But equally, We do try and support as many communities as possible. So we do offer language translation. To access that, we would just need the person to be able to ring our number and let us know what language it is that they require, and their phone number, unless we can see that already. And we would then arrange for a call back to happen with the translator who can speak the language that they require. And that just means that anyone within the UK who's not an English speaker, it might be that English isn't the first language and they feel more comfortable speaking, in their own language, we'd be able to get that translation support for them. And we also have support through BSL interpretation, and I believe we're the only helpline in the UK that offers that kind of support, which is huge. And we're so proud of the partnership that we've got to be able to provide that support. So to access that, you just go through our website, find British Sign Language on the Papyrus website, and you can click a button and it'll help you to connect with a BSL interpreter. So that'll be a video chat, and the interpreter would talk through what's going to happen during that conversation. If they see something that might make them think that the person's at risk, they'd name it to the person and say, I can see this is happening in the background. I'm going to have to tell the HOPELINE advisor that that's what's happening and we'll help you, sort of thing. So it's a real joint effort during those conversations, and we've worked really hard to get those partnerships to be safe and supportive.
That's such an amazing service, and I think it will be really helpful for people to understand that you offer that, that it isn't just picking up a phone. There's the web chat, there's the texting, but then to know that you can receive support regardless of what language you speak, including sign language, I think is absolutely extraordinary. And I think it, particularly thinking of people within the profession with which I work, to be able perhaps to signpost people to that if they are seeing clients or working with somebody, that might need that type of service, I think will be really helpful to understand that that's out there and something you offer. And as you say, uniquely so at the moment. What an extraordinary service. That's amazing. And that's all 24/7 as well, Charlotte, just to check on that. I'm assuming maybe not in the same way.
Yeah, so with the language interpretation, that is accessible. With our sign language interpretation at the moment, I believe that is until 8 p.m. at the moment. So yeah, it is available. It is there until 8 p.m. But equally, if people needed support and were able to text us or email, web chat throughout the night as well, before being able to get on with an interpreter, we'd encourage them to do that as well, and we can help them gear up to make that call.
Oh, thank you for helping us understand that. That's great. And as I always say, when we post this episode up and release it, we'll pop all the links and all the information necessary for people in that too, so they can follow those through and get in touch if that would be helpful, or signpost friends, family or clients to that for you. So I suppose as we come very close to the end, unbelievably, I suppose I want to ask what next? Is there anything, any campaigns or anything that might be helpful sort of news-wise to share? I suppose we're just coming on the back of World Suicide Awareness Day. That was early September, wasn't it? We're recording this sort of mid-October. So anything sort of coming up to the end of the year or early next year, perhaps?
Very good question. I think for Papyrus, we're just wanting to carry on getting ourselves out there as much as possible. We've always got some new offices popping up. There's always training going on. So we're in more and more locations. So I'd say look out for us in your local area. If you're out, doing stalls and things, we might be there too, and come and say hello to the team. We've always got training events on, which is fantastic. We're just hoping to get bigger and better and keep pushing with our strategy.
Yeah, Yeah, that's really good to hear. And that's fabulous that hopefully we can be part of that too by sharing our conversation today and helping people understand so much about what you do, that it isn't, we say, just a helpline. Do you know what I mean? And I mean that in the best way possible. That there's so much more that you offer and you can do. And again, I can only sort of say thank you to you and all the team at HOPELINE and at Papyrus, but particularly you guys that are on that front line, as it were, having those conversations all hours of the day and night with young people, young vulnerable people. What extraordinary work you do. Thank heavens that you're there.
Oh, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you to Charlotte for joining me today, and thank you for listening in. If you would like to know more about Papyrus and HOPELINE247, all the information and links you need are provided in the show notes below. This podcast is brought to you by the National Counselling and Psychotherapy Society, a professional home for counsellors, psychotherapists, and over 120 wellbeing organisations across the UK. Autonomy, diversity, creativity and community are at the heart of what we do. We are creating a positive space for conversations with people who share common beliefs and goals, because together our voice is louder. If you would like to know more about the NCPS, please visit www.ncps.com for more information. And please remember to follow and subscribe so you're always part of the conversation.